Oh, man. At the very least, why not tasers? Why not pepper spray? Why not non-lethal means of self-defense?
Jesus didn't carry a taser, you know that.
You're right. We should just be armed with the Holy Spirit.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 278. Thank you all so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. Glad to have you with us for what's going to be another a fun show. This is our variety show week for our new listeners. That means that we have content from the entire cast. Myself, Pastor John Bennett, Mia Anstein, and of course, the one, the only, Sergeant Bill Sylvia. They will be along here shortly to provide you with some entertainment and information. For new listeners, welcome aboard. First of all, thank you for stumbling across the show, finding the show for the first time if you're new. Hope you enjoy what you hear today, and I hope you will come back again next week. What we're doing this week for our variety show is another of our, in the series, I guess, of shows that we call Ask the Armed Lutherans. And what we're doing is, during these shows, we've done, I think, three previously. And basically what we do is we take a question from a fan and we all answer the question. Gives you a little bit of an insight into each of the cast members, a little behind the scenes look at who we are as Armed Lutherans. It's fun. This week we're doing kind of a back to school thing, talking about how we ended up doing what we do. But first, I want to give a shout out to the men and women who make this show possible, the members of the Reformation Gun Club. And this week, I want to give a shout out to Dan from Enumclaw, Washington, Catherine from Casper, Wyoming, our gospel quartet of members, Matthew from Nixa, Missouri, Mark from Woodland, Washington, Luke from Seymour, Indiana, and John from Wheaton, Illinois, and our newest members, Ron from Lexington Park, Maryland, and Anita from Old Fort, Tennessee. Welcome aboard, Ron and Anita, and thank you all so much for your support, especially during these crazy economic times. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means we don't have any advertising, we don't have any sponsors. We rely on the good, the support of these good and wonderful people who value what we do. The members of the Reformation Gun Club. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show, get lots of cool perks as well. And if you'd like to find out more about the benefits and membership levels and how you can support us, visit armedlutheran.us/gun club or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, this is our variety show week. As I said, we're doing another installment of Ask the Armed Lutherans, and it's back to school time. Parents, you're probably getting ready to send your kids back to school, or if you haven't done so already, around here in Texas, schools have reopened in some districts. Ours starts this week. We just got back from a kind of a last-minute vacation trip down to SeaWorld for those of you who are members of the Reformation Gun Club, and got to hear me discuss security theater in this week's members-only podcast. That was filmed and recorded on site at SeaWorld. The question that we're answering this week from a listener is, what did you want to be when you were a kid? And how and why did you did that change? And I added this request to the cast as well. As kids are going back to school and young people are heading off to college, what advice would you have about looking forward to their future and their careers? For me, I'll get started. I'll kick it off with my story. Contrary to popular opinion, I'm not a full-time professional podcaster. You probably can tell that already. But I'm a software developer. That definitely was not what I started out to be when I was a kid. This is the road from young Armed Lutheran to now is a long and windy one. And I loved computers and computer games as a kid. I remember Pong and the Atari game console, and the Commodore 64 was my first computer. I still have it. I still have that computer sitting in the closet. What caught my interest in school was history and ultimately archaeology. I kind of joke that I wanted to be Indiana Jones, out digging up bones and excavating archaeological sites and learning about long ago peoples and their cultures. I went off to college. I read a number of books, and I became, at this time, enamored with the theory of human evolution, Darwin on down, and eventually read a book by a guy who was, at the time the book was published, was a professor at a particular college. I applied. I was accepted. I went off and got there and found that he'd already moved on to some other place. I think it was Berkeley, which is not terribly surprising. But that's another story for another time. Anyway, I pictured myself as, being the guy who was out digging up sites around the world, cleaning bones and discovering our ancient ancestors and so forth. And the realization that wasn't exactly a great career path hit me a little bit later. Eventually, for personal reasons, I ended up moving back to North Carolina and eventually dropped out for one reason or another, most of them bad. But if I think about thinking back on it, it worked out pretty well as a result of those, what I thought at the time were probably inconsequential choices. One of the choices was, while I was in college, to intern at the campus radio station. And that's where my love for radio, for broadcasting came from. So I moved back to North Carolina to make ends meet while I was trying to figure my life out. I did all kinds of odd jobs here and there. One of the first was working for a small market AM radio station. And I had leveraged my experience in college radio to work in that small market 1,000-watt blowtorch in Western North Carolina. I wore lots of hats and learned lots of stuff. I sold advertising. I wrote copy, which is writing, script writing commercials. I did voice work. I did production work. And back then it wasn't the awesome digital stuff that I do now. It was like reel-to-reel editing. And, you have to stop and splice and tape tapes back together. I was a DJ. And back then, you had turntables. It wasn't pushing buttons. It's a totally lost art at this point. I did sports broadcasting, both color commentary and play-by-play. I did a little of everything. And it was great fun. But when I got married, I recognized that was kind of a dead end. There was only so far you can go in small market radio. And so I decided I needed to improve my income to support my new family. And so I started changing jobs, chasing bigger and bigger paychecks. So I took my experience in advertising sales and thought that I could be a salesperson. Went and sold printing and sold sporting goods and sold uniforms, you name it. I was out there, and it never really worked out. The uniform sales was the worst. There's nothing like driving around in one of those big panel trucks, collecting uniforms, stinky, dirty uniforms at different places, and trying to convince, while at the same time trying to convince your customers to increase their purchases, their monthly and weekly purchases, driving all over Western North Carolina and either freezing to death or burning up because there's no air conditioning or no heat in the truck. So that was always fun. But I did it thinking, I've got to bring in a paycheck. This is going to lead somewhere else. And then my son comes along, and I decided, it's probably time to get serious. At that point, my career path was not so much a path. It was more like an overgrown sort of goat trail through the woods with lots of weeds and not really going anywhere. So at the time, computers were kind of a big thing. Computer careers were really starting to take off. And going back to my love of computers as a kid, I thought, that's something I could do. That's something I could get into. So I decided not to go sink a ton of money into a 4-year degree. I went back to the local community college. During the day, I went to class, and at night, I worked second and third shifts for a local trucking company in data entry. I ended up getting a degree with honors in computer programming. That's a little misleading because it took me a little while to figure out that when people ask you what you do and you say computer programming, they automatically assume that you can fix their computer. My first job out of in IT was as the IT coordinator for a local elementary school. It was just a semester long thing because I think the IT lady or guy was out on sabbatical or something. And so I just filled in. And it was an opportunity to sort of get my feet wet while at the same time sending out resumes and trying to get interviews. And that first call that I got, I had several interviews, and they all boiled down to, well, you don't really have any experience. And then this company calls me, and they start reading through my resume, and they're ticking off these trucking companies that I worked for. And I worked for one, they went out of business, and then I went to work for another, and then I changed shifts. I wanted to change shifts, so there was an opportunity to work at a third. And so the guy was ticking these things off, and I'm thinking, yep, I know where this is going. So I stopped him before he finished, and I said, I know what you're going to say. I don't have any experience. I understand that. I'm just looking for an opportunity. And he said, well, oddly enough, your experience is exactly what we're looking for. The guy's company was developing software for warehousing, and many of his clients had trucking companies and logistics companies built in. And so that's where I got my start. I was hired on to help them develop a trucking management software for them, and I wasn't actually hired to do development. I was hired to sort of liaise with the client and figure out what their needs were, write it up in ways that a programmer would understand, give it to the programmer, and let him do the work. And then came the fateful day when I was sitting in front of a dozen regional vice presidents from all over Canada to demonstrate this software to them, and it didn't work. It was full of bugs. All the important things that we needed to do didn't work. It threw error messages after error messages, and we finally took a break, got the programmer on the phone, told him what was going on, and was told, I don't have time to help you. So from that moment on, I decided I would never be in that situation again. And I taught myself using my recent experience as, newly minted computer programmer degree to learn this programming language and to fix things when things didn't work, so that I didn't have to rely on the one programmer guy. And ultimately, I think about 6 months later, I took over as the lead programmer on that project. Here I am, 18 years later, still developing in that software, and I'm now in Texas. And so that long and winding road started very, very strangely and ended in a place I never would have imagined 30 years ago when I was in college. So the lessons for those who are just going off to college, those who are just applying for college or just starting high school and really starting to think about your future, seriously think about your future for the first time. And for the parents of kids who are in those situations, if you're concerned about your kids' futures and you're trying to help them plan it all out, here's some lessons that I think you can take away from my story. First of all, college isn't for everyone, despite the fact that the school, the teachers, the culture, politicians, the media, and your school counselors will tell you that you've got to go to college. You don't. There are lots of great opportunities, and there are lots of jobs that need to be done that pay very well that don't require a college degree. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm against going to college. Don't get me wrong, but don't be so focused on I've got to go to college, and don't be so focused, parents. If your kids, it's possible that college just isn't for them. You need to be open to that idea. Second point is that community college is kind of great. Just ask Dr. Jill Biden, the country's greatest doctor. She will tell you that community college is awesome. And it actually is. It is what turned my career, my life around. I wasted for 3 years, I can't even imagine how much, pursuing a degree that would have maybe gotten me a job making a fraction of the tuition and room and board that I paid over the course of those 3 years at a major university. This is, again, why college isn't for everyone. College is a money pit, especially for young people who are trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And that brings me to the next point. You don't have to figure this out in high school. You don't have to figure it out when you first go off to college. Everyone will try to shoehorn you into a career path early on. But the truth is that what you want to do will probably change several times. Your ideas about what you want to do, and for parents, what your kids want to do, is going to change. And you should recognize that. And if that's the case, and they don't, coming out of high school or going through high school, and they don't have a real firm commitment to what it is they're passionate about, what it is they want to do, then maybe community college is the best way to go. Start out in community college and then go from there. Don't think that community college is beneath you or beneath your kids, because it's not. Be open to the idea that there are alternatives to college. There are alternatives to 4-year college. And your kids are going to change their minds a lot about what it is they want to do. I mentioned passion earlier. Don't follow your passion. Following your passion usually will mean that you're disappointed in the end, and that you'll probably not be able to make a living following your passion. Be willing to work. Be willing to learn, to put in the hard work, to put in the effort. No job is beneath you. That's the other thing. I went through a lot of different jobs over the years, trying to figure out what I ultimately wanted to do. But ultimately, there's a dignity in work and being able to earn for yourself instead of sitting back and accepting handouts. Be willing to put in the work, because people will notice and you'll be rewarded for it if you have a track record as a hard worker. And I guess the final lesson is, don't be surprised when experiences and opportunities and interests that you really think are trivial end up having a major influence on your outcomes. For me, I mean, look what the biggest influence for me on doing what I do now with the podcast was that experience back in college as an intern from 3 to 5 a.m. on a heavy metal show called Time to Rage. That instilled in me a love for this medium. And the time I spent trying to teach myself basic programming on a Commodore 64 ultimately led to the career that I'm currently in. And I never would have guessed it at the time. I never would have suspected that thing that I did for fun, playing games and writing a little bit of code and trying to make the computer do stuff, that would turn out to have the biggest impact on my career of all of my experiences. So I hope those are some helpful lessons. I hope you found that interesting. And as your kids head off to school, off to college, or to back to high school, whatever, as they're starting to think about their futures, I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope hope you have a great year. All right, it is time for me to shut up. It's time for me to turn this over to the rest of the cast. Mia Ann Stein, Sergeant Bill Sylvia, and Pastor John Bennett. Sit back, relax, enjoy the rest of the show, and I will talk to you next week.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Ann Stein.
Hey, hi, hello. It's Mia Ann Stein visiting with you again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying National Shooting Sports Month. I personally have been super busy farming. And by farming, what I mean is it is hay season. So we've been baling like 1,000 acres of hay, which is quite a bit of work. And the other day, my mother-in-law said, "Did you ever think you would marry a farmer or grow up and be a farmer?" And I kind of had to giggle because no, I didn't. But as a youngster, I actually lived on a ranch, and my godfather did raise hay and baled, and we helped and all of that. So today's topic of what did you want to be when you grew up? It's a great thing to visit about, because no, I didn't think I would be baling hay as an adult, but I am. And actually, I quite enjoy it. It's pretty therapeutic and it's fun. When I was a youngster, what I wanted to be when I grew up was a pilot. I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. And the reason why is because I wanted to travel the world. And guess what? I have been traveling the world, and no, I'm not a commercial airline pilot, but I have enjoyed quite a bit of fun adventures, and I didn't have to get that pilot license to do that. What I've done, I went to college to study dietetics and nutrition and business. And I also have a degree in interior decor. Is that crazy? I actually did that as a side degree because I was terrible at decorating my house and I wanted to be better at it. So when you want to be better, guess what you do? You go and you learn and you get the knowledge, just like we do with firearms. So anytime that you think you might enjoy doing something, you should go ahead and give it a try. And if you don't know how to do something, definitely take some classes and learn how to do it better. Really, anytime that you think you want to do something, the sky is the limit. There are so many opportunities. So nowadays, I have those degrees, but I am an advocate, and I advocate for wildlife, I advocate for hunters, and I advocate for the Second Amendment, and a whole bunch of other things. But those are the primary ones that I talk about here on Armed Lutheran Radio. You just really never know where your path is going to take you. Along my way, along my journey, I have had a lot of amazing jobs, and one of them was in college, and you would just think that it was ridiculous, but I made a ton of money, and I worked at a grocery store. It was a part of a union, and I know unions are bad words nowadays, but I made a ton of money, probably way too much for a college student, that's for sure. I also had a career for almost 20 years in the building industry. I worked for lumber companies. I sold doors, windows, trusses, other building materials, and I happened to have been super good at that. I was the top salesperson, not just in our state, but in our region, which was pretty cool, I thought. I also made commission at the time and, again, made a ton of money. And that was a fabulous thing for a single mom, because at the time it was just my daughter and I, and it helped me to buy a house and a truck and to pay that truck off. So if you're ever just on your own, I've met a lot of moms, they get divorced and they kind of say, oh, poor me. And it's an excuse because you don't have another half. And I think it's all in how you look at things. If you look at yourself as poor me and take that victim mentality, then guess what happens to you? You become a victim. Whereas I took it upon myself to accelerate in the career that I had at the time, and I made a fabulous life for my daughter and I. And then eventually I met my husband, and now, of course, we have a fabulous life together. But the thing about it is I was independent. I am independent. I am self-sufficient. And it's just another added bonus to have someone to share that with. So always look at what you can do. You do not have to rely on someone else unless you want to. I mean, heck, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom and have your husband support you, that is a fabulous thing. My mom actually did that for the first few years of my life, and I am forever grateful that she had that time with us. One thing I will tell you about my job as a salesperson doing the building materials. I said I worked commission, but I also was salaried and I made my own schedule. So speaking of spending time with your youngsters, I was able to work from home. I was able to go drop my daughter off at school. And then after I dropped her off at school, I would go into the office and work. So there are always ways to make things happen. And one thing I will tell you is, yes, I said be independent, but also don't get rid of other people in your life. It is very healthy to have other individuals in your life. We are human and we need other people. So make sure that when you need help, ask for help. Make sure that you build and nurture relationships and that you have those people in your life that you could call on. And another thing is, don't forget to be that person. I have a few people in my life that if they needed something, boy, they could call me and I would be there in a heartbeat. And I have a few other people, they're not necessarily always the same people, but I have a few other people who, if I needed something, they would be there in a minute. And another thing about that is one of those people that I have been there for, I've also taken them to the range. I've taught them firearm safety. I've taught them how to shoot. And then they become even more self-sufficient and independent, and they become their own first responder. So always keep learning, always keep training, and make sure that you share with others. I hope you have a great month. I hope that you're sharing some shooting sports with others, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaandstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today, Lloyd wanted me to talk to you about what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Well, in all honesty, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I just wanted to make a bunch of money and have a lot of fun. So I really had no direction. I knew, honestly, that no matter what I wanted to do, I was going to just try to have fun and enjoy life. And I think I've been doing that most of my life, but it wasn't until I was in college and a couple years into college, spending my parents' money, and just taking classes and had no idea what was going on. I had a frank discussion with my older brother. So after changing my major like 3 times in my first 2 years in college, I called my brother up and I said, "Bro, I'm having trouble. I don't know what I want to do. I thought I wanted to do this. I thought I wanted to do that. And nothing sounds interesting to me." And he told me, find what you like and what you're interested in, and then find a job where someone pays you to do that. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and drinking beer and chasing women was not a job career that anybody had available at that time. So I kept thinking, and I realized that I liked cars. I had recently just gone and shot a handgun for the first time ever when I was about 20 years old, and really was quite taken with that. Go figure. And I was also kind of an adrenaline junkie. So what could I do for a living that had a lot to do with cars and dealing with people and was kind of exciting and may or may not have guns involved? Law enforcement. It was really funny, too, because growing up, we had a couple cops that lived right behind my parents' house, and I never really got to know them too much until I had that revelation that maybe I want to get into law enforcement. At the time, I didn't really want to do like city cop stuff. I really wanted to do like federal law enforcement, like U.S. Marshals or Secret Service or something really cool like that. And that was actually the plan after meeting a friend of my mom's that was an FBI agent in Dallas and getting to tour their facility and talk to him. And my plan was go in the military and do a few years there and come out and do small town police for a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years, and then bump up to federal law enforcement. And everything went along according to plan until about 5 years working DPD, and I realized I kind of liked it there, and I kind of liked some of the people that I was working with. So I figured, hey, I'm going to stick around here. So did I know what I wanted to do when I was a kid growing up? No, didn't have a clue. I still don't think I've grown up, and I'm still not really sure I know what I want to do, except for have fun and enjoy life. So have fun. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Hello, dear listeners. This is Pastor John Bennett, the Pistol Packing Padre. And what did I want to do when I was a kid? Well, first off, I wanted to be a computer programmer back when I was in high school, going back into junior high even. I picked up computer programming very quickly. I even took a college course on programming C++ when I was in the 9th grade. At the same time, I was also taking Pascal, another programming language, and the teacher for that class, this is at a small Lutheran high school, it got to the point where he was actually asking me questions because I read through the book and I understood the programming language, and it seemed that I could understand these concepts even better than he could. So it was something that I had a big aptitude for. something that I was very much interested in. But then as time slowly passed, all of that changed. And I lost interest primarily because the world of computer programming was changing so rapidly at that time. This was the early 90s, and I just didn't have the time to keep up with the constant changes that were taking place while trying to be a high school student. So the other thing that I was really good at, though, was math. And as I started college, my goal was to become a financial advisor. I was going to take a double major in math and business, and I was perfectly capable of that. And then about halfway through my first semester as a freshman at Concordia University in Irvine, California, I realized that I wasn't terribly interested in math and business and in any of that. Yes, I could have made a lot of money doing that, but my primary interest was in theology. And I felt that the Lord was calling me to the vocation of a pastor, and I entered the pre-seminary program, and the rest is kind of history. But what's my advice to young people, especially those who are looking towards education after high school, looking towards the possibility of college? And there's a few key points I want to share with you. If perhaps this is you and you're one of our listeners and you fall into that age bracket, or if you have family or friends that need advice on this kind of thing. And the first is, you don't have to go to college. I graduated from high school in that era where it seemed like you were an absolute nobody unless you happened to enroll in college. And the better the college, the more prestigious and so forth. That was the goal for many young people. But nowadays, it's getting to the point where so many people have useless college degrees that college is getting to the point where it means absolutely nothing. So if you are going to go to college, make sure that you know what you want to do with your life. If you enter into college as an undeclared major, don't do that. You're just heaping tons of debt on yourself for something that, hey, you don't know what you want to do with your life. You may not end up needing a college degree for what you decide you're interested in later on. So first, don't go to college unless you are absolutely certain you are entering into a career that requires a specific degree. If you're going into engineering, if you're going into any of the STEM areas of study, that would be great, because those are the areas where there is a big job market for you. There is a potential of a very good career with those degree programs. So what happens, though, if maybe 4 years of college and, depending on what area of study, if you're looking at, law or medicine, that kind of thing, and you're looking at 8 years plus of study, well, what happens if that just doesn't seem to interest you? A few stories. Well, I'll just share two in particular, and both of these are my brothers. My one brother didn't know what he wanted to do with his life after high school. He just kind of bummed around and met someone who was an electrician. And it took him a while to finally figure out where he was going in life, but he ended up signing up with a union, becoming an apprentice. The union paid for his vocational school, and now he makes a six-figure salary. He never paid a penny for college because it was all paid for by the union. He has a more profitable career than I do after 8 years of higher education. Of course, I didn't go into this career. I shouldn't say career. I didn't become a pastor for the money. Certainly did. That's not the case, unless I wanted to be one of those television preachers who sold their souls for a pile of cash. But my brother, he's going to make a very good career, and he never had to go to school, at least college. He had vocational school that was paid for while he was working and earning a living at the same time. My other brother, same kind of thing. He didn't know what he wanted to do after high school. He had an interest in aerospace, and he ended up going to vocational school to become an aerospace technician. And his employer, again, paid for his school, 2 years of vocational school, all paid for. He makes a decent salary, and he never had to go to a traditional college. So there are opportunities out there, especially when it comes to the trade schools, vocations, electrician, plumber, Well, they're all of those vocations. Those are in high demand, especially now where you have the government paying people more money to stay home and do nothing than if they're actually working and making a living. Heck, you could even become a truck driver. Right now, there's a big demand for over-the-road truck drivers because, again, same issue, people staying at home, taking money from Uncle Joe Biden rather than actually working and making a decent living. So that would be my advice. You don't have to go to college. If you do, make sure you know what you want to do with your life, and your degree has a fairly high guarantee of a career of employment after graduation. If you don't want to go to college, if you don't want to do 4 to 8 years, depending on what career you're looking at, vocational school is great. I've never met a plumber that I despised because, let's face it, the world needs plumbers more than they need lawyers. Well, that's my advice for today. Christ's blessings to you all, and have a very blessed week.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.